How to Make Our Mental Images Come True, a series of easy lessons in the art of visualizing by George Schuebel. Part 3, Technique of Visualizing. Chapter 1, Preparing Our Thought Object for Reproduction. We have now touched upon all the preliminaries involved in visualizing, and with a thorough knowledge of these, we are possessed of the secret of our Aladdin's lamp. We know the method of its operation, and we are ready to apply this method in bringing to us whatsoever in good we want to have, to be, or do. We have confidently selected a certain definite mental object, which by means of this method of deliberate visualizing has become the object of our heart's desire. It may be a much-needed sum of money for ourselves or for someone whom we dearly love or want to help. It may be a home. It may be the establishment of a business. Or it may be any other object in life which we want to bring into outward visibility. Our formulating faculties have been at work, specializing and differentiating our desire. It has been placed in the current of our objective thinking and now has taken shape as an object of thought in the photographic studio of our objective minds. Suppose we take 3 definite objects, all of which can be coordinated into what we may term the outpicturing of a career. Let these objects be $5,000, a business, and a home. We now begin to condition ourselves mentally for this purpose. Our first consideration is the quiet, darkened room in some part of the house. This room will serve every mental purpose which we have covered in our preliminary studies: studio, dark chamber, and developing room. We remember that if such a room is not available, then our work can be carried on at night in bed just as effectively. In fact, the very early hours are best for our work, and wherever possible, the student should accommodate himself or herself to these hours. Seating ourselves in a comfortable armchair, which will permit the greatest possible relaxation, or reclining on a couch, or lying in a bed, we begin our practical work by bringing the object of our heart's desire, our career, to mind. We recall the fact that this action of the will requires as little strenuous effort as does the photographer in placing his object in a position where he can photograph it to the best advantage. In fact, if the object is truly desired, then it is uppermost in our minds, and in that position soon makes its presence felt in our consciousness without any effort on our part. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Pouring Light Upon Our Thought Object. We must remember that we feel our mental object before we see it. The entire process involved in establishing a thought object in the mind and photographing it is almost so instantaneous that we are not consciously aware of any stages, and yet it is the incitement of the object in our mind which makes us think about it and upon it. As we sit in our darkened room, and this means that a steady stream of our thinking is being directed toward our objects in the same manner in which the sun's rays pour themselves about and upon material objects. Moved by the gentle heat generated by our thinking, our mechanical faculties, the mechanical apparatus of the mind, which we have termed our mental camera, imperceptibly glides into action, and in this same instant, sitting in our darkened room, we behold the objects not outwardly but inwardly. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Seeing Our Thought Object in Reflection. We are seeing our objects now, not directly, but by means of the single inner mental eye of the mind's camera, which has caught up, collected, and transmitted the rays of our illumined thinking into the illumining chamber of our consciousness. We behold our objects there and study them by means of reflection. Wherever we fix our look now in the darkness of the room, whether upon the wall or ceiling or floor, when our physical eyes are closed, we will see the phenomenon of our objects projecting themselves. They will appear first as a disk of white light and then slowly and gradually resolve themselves into the objects contained in the mind. We are seeing our mental objects now as projected thoughts or images of light capable for the moment of extension by reflection outside of ourselves. Wonderful indeed is this phenomenon of the projective power of mind, but it is only the beginning of a mental projection which will carry our thoughts later on to distances and places far beyond the range of our own limited vision. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Pouring more mental light upon our thought. As we sit in our silence room and contemplate our thought, we seek to make our reflection of it more clear by getting more light of understanding upon it. Since the more understanding we can apply, the more clear the subsequent impression will be. Sitting quietly, we bring into play that informative or illuminative light which has become part of us as the result of observation and experience, or as the result of relating ourselves to the universal source of all understanding of which we are a part. From whatever source our enlightenment comes, we must pour all of it now at this time of reflection so that we may see our object in the clearest light possible. The thought of money, business, home must be so illumined that in reflection we must see clearly all that which pertains to it. We must remember that we are dealing with things, and that no matter how much we may sublimate them in our visualizing, they are yet conditional. And for this reason, they are related to circumstances and conditions. And these circumstances and conditions must be known and seen and made to conform themselves as a part of the picture of our career. For instance, our $5,000 may not really suffice for the enterprise we have in mind. It may be of a nature which will not permit much home life. It may require residence abroad. And those for whom we are planning a home may not want to leave their own present environment for various reasons which must be taken into account. These are circumstances and conditions which enter into our picture and upon which the light of our understanding must be poured. Then, too, we must be familiar by means of outward observation and experience with the things which relate themselves to our inner picture. If our thought of $5,000 is a vague one, then, before we try to see it clearly in mind, we must go to the bank and ask the teller to show us 5 1,000 bills or 50 100 bills, which we will study carefully, and in this way we get more light upon the money. We are able to see it mentally more clearly. So with business enterprise, if it is an automobile business we have in mind, we visit automobile factories and observe the method of building an automobile. So with the home, we visit the homes of our friends. We become acquainted with the various kinds of architecture, the kinds of brick and timber, the arrangement of rooms, and every other detail which will help to throw light upon the thought of the home which we are contemplating now. However, there is a yet finer, rarer light of understanding which we will now apply, an enlightenment which will make our reflected thought of money, business, and home ever so much more clear for impressive purposes, and which will bring us ever so much more positive results. We stimulate this finer light of understanding when in our contemplation we ask ourselves, why do I want the $5,000, the business, the home? And when we answer this question from the inner spiritual source of all light of our being, we bring a flood of illumination upon our projected thought. We now begin to see our thought about the money, the business, the home in an entirely different light. As we say, we see now that it is not the thing which we want, but rather that which the thing symbolizes. It is not the outer object, but the inner object which we are in the process of bringing forth. What is this inner object or purpose? It is not the money, but the power which money symbolizes. It is not the business, but the means it provides for extending our goodwill to others, and for providing happiness to those whom we love. It is not the home, the building of brick or timber, but the comfort, the peace, the love, the joy, the domestic felicity, the shelter and protection which a home represents or should represent. The more we see our objects in this light of spiritual understanding, the more inspired we become, and this inspired thinking provides the radiant and luminous mental light whereby our object becomes crystal clear to us. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Establishing our correct viewpoint. What is more, this finer light of our higher understanding enables us now to establish our true viewpoint toward our thought. Unless of an unusually spiritually endowed or instructed mind, we would have viewed our purpose in securing $5,000 or a business or a home as the average mind views these things. We would have viewed them simply as things. We might have looked upon the $5,000 merely as a means to establishing a business for the purpose of making more money so that we could have plenty to spend not only for the purchase of a home, but for many other things. And these things we may merely have desired as a means of gratifying our pride, our vanity, our selfishness, or lust, or any other inverted or secondary relative cause in mind. But now we view our imaged thought from an entirely different viewpoint, so that we know that what we want is really not the thing, which after all is a very elementary and limited object involving circumstances and conditions, but we want that which the thing symbolizes or represents. We want, in so far as the money is concerned, the power to be and to have and to do the good we have in mind. We realize that money is simply the circulating medium, the symbol of value by means of which we are empowered to negotiate for that which is necessary in establishing our business and our home, and for accomplishing those purposes which are best carried out in our business and home. Besides giving us the means of performing service, it will give us the occasion to employ and help others. It will make us the means of distribution of something which others need. In the manner that our money represents power, so as we have already seen, our business represents service and other mental values. And in like manner, our home symbolizes comfort, shelter, love, protection, and those other qualities which we usually associate with the thought of home. We think of our home as a place where we are going to invite our friends and guests, where they are going to find mental and spiritual as well as material comforts, where we are going to exercise all those virtues which will serve for our own life expansion and that of others. In a word, we now see these so-called things reflected in our minds not simply as things, but as the very underlying understanding of our being, formed and projected and ready to be brought forth into our outward lives. Our understanding light has shaped itself into the forms of money, business, and home, and this understanding light is made up of the prismatic qualities or causes which in this way become embodiments of power, service, goodwill, protection, love, comfort, harmony, peace, and joy in us and through us. Taking this viewpoint, we need have no more concern with the impressiveness of our object and its power to reproduce itself. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. Focusing upon our imaged thought. With proper light and a right viewpoint toward our thought, we focus our whole attention upon it, bearing in mind that we are now focusing not on the $5,000, the business and the home, but upon the qualities of joy, love, protection, peace, and happiness, of which these mental objects are merely symbols. These qualities have taken shape simply so that we can see and get their reflection for purposes of outward reproduction. Let us also bear in mind that this concentration does not imply attention or strained effort of the will, but rather an easy and pleasant exercise. We have said that concentration upon one single object of thought does not mean necessarily that our thought must be comprised of only one thing. It may take in a number of things, so long as they are directly related and serve to make a complete picture, and this is so in the instance of the career which we are out picturing. The $5,000, as we have already said, is for the purpose of financing our business enterprise. And our business enterprise is for the purpose, among other good purposes, of providing a suitable home for those whom we love. We see how every one of these objects is a very essential and related part of our thought, and we should not hesitate to allow whatever other thoughts of a related kind that come to us to image themselves and to become, as they will, part of the good picture of our career. Thus, in our thought of the business, we may plan perhaps to include a brother or a sister. We may make it a corporation in which we can include several of our friends. We may include an automobile which will serve both our business and our pleasure. What we aim to avoid now is the intrusion of any vagrant thoughts which may and will seek to enter within the magic circle where our one definite thought is held. We must allow no fear thought, no opposing thought, no worry thoughts, no alien thought of any kind to enter through our mental camera eye. But rather we must keep our eye single to the one true thought of our career. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Impressing our imaged thought. Having the best possible quality and quantity of higher understanding, reflecting the $5,000, the business, and the home, having a scientifically correct focus and viewpoint, our career will now be imaged forth in a form of understanding light, which will permit the very finest impression to be made upon our subjective thinking substance. We have seen that our money, our business, and our home is good for us to have, and in the moment in which we truly acknowledge and recognize this fact mentally, our thought will become an impressive one. It will make its impression upon us in the finest and most definite way possible. The shutter of the mind is voluntarily and momentarily lifted. The full light of our understanding moves into and impresses itself upon the sensitized film of our subjective thinking. It takes on the qualities of this subjective thinking and becomes infilmed and sealed in the subjective, undergoing a silent, invisible inner development or reduction on its way toward ultimate matter. And however infinitely inconceivable this reduction is, we can say that it is now becoming a more dense form than the pure form of mental light was before impression. We are now ready to follow our imaged thought in the next stage of the outward development. End of Chapter 7. Of How to Make Our Mental Images Come True by George Schuebel, narrated by Rex King.